the ability of the political class to get things wrong wholesale is not new. And I'm going to be really controversial here, Chairman, and point something out that may appall some in this audience, but it's true. From 1933 to 1936, virtually the entire British establishment, including Lloyd George, the hero of the First World War, including, during his brief tenure, Edward VIII as king, most of the British aristocracy, virtually the whole of Fleet Street, and a vast majority of Parliament thought Hitler was a very, very good man. After the Sudetenland, they all didn't think he was a good man, but they thought he was containable. And there was nothing too much to worry about. And the only person that warned from 1933 onwards, clearly and consistently, with the support of 20 backbenchers who were mocked and derided in cartoons in the Time newspaper as being warmongers, lunatics, eccentrics. I would say cranks, gadflies and fruitcakes, but that was later. And the only people that stood up to it were Churchill and a small crew in Parliament. Do not underestimate the ability of the political class through groupthink to get things wrong. They've done it before and they've done it on this.
In the real world, isn't the reality that you are, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but that you are a protest vote? That you are, if the Liberal Democrats were not in coalition now, it would be the Lib Dems, as traditionally happens between elections. There's no vehicle through the Lib Dems anymore, so people have turned to you.
I think many of the Lib Dem votes were protest votes. I would agree with that. You know, when you voted Lib Dem, it was to a large extent a plague on both your houses. I'm going to vote Lib Dem. But nobody ever knew what the Lib Dems actually stood for, other than their general marketing that they were nice. Well, in fact, they're probably the nastiest bunch out there. As we saw with the way Charlie Kennedy was removed and the way that Ming Campbell was removed. Nobody that votes UKIP is in any doubt of exactly what we stand for. Our policies, we wear them on our sleeves, we're not ashamed of them, we're actually rather proud of them. And I first heard this protest vote idea the morning after the Easter election. You know, the BBC said, it's a protest vote. And Ken Clarke came on. I like Ken Clarke. Isn't he wonderful? I mean, there we were, though he's wonderful to me, the Sunday before the local elections this year. I was in the kitchen, I was washing up, honestly, I was washing up after breakfast, and Sky News was on, and they said, we're now going to Kenneth Clarke's garden in Nottinghamshire. And there, wearing this bizarre turtleneck arrangement, was the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, looking like he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards after a heavy Saturday night, saying UKIP are all a bunch of clowns. And I think he must have put 2 to 3% on our vote. So thank you very much. I'm actually thinking at the UKIP conference this year of perhaps inaugurating the annual Ken Clarke Cup for services to Euroscepticism and British independence. So I'm used to all this rubbish, I'm used to all this abuse. Do you know what? None of it means a damn thing. And actually, whatever they say, it doesn't really matter. Whatever they say about us doesn't matter, and whatever they tell the public now almost doesn't matter. Our loss of faith, our loss of belief, our loss of deference for our political class is now so total that I think we're going to head into a period of massive political change, and I think UKIP are going to be the catalyst for that change.
Let's get on with one of the issues that I think most disturbs a lot of the Jewish community. You've been very clear about the fact that you will have no truck in racism and those kinds of issues, and that you're not a repository for ex-BNPites and those kinds of issues. However, there is a pattern, isn't there? I mean, if one looks at things, you know, David Cameron's dismissal of you as fruitcakes and loonies and closet racists, there is a kernel of truth in some of that. You may not be. But if we look at some of the activities of UKIP members, you had council candidates in Rotherham and Leicester who had links to the BNP. You had a candidate in Sussex who accused Jews of engineering the Second World War and talked about how important the protocols of Zion was for understanding the world. Lord Willoughby de Brooke, in one of your spokesmen in the House of Lords, talked about austerity as being austerity Mac Fry and the way the Germans operated. And when it was pointed out to him how offensive this was, adamantly refused to apologise. I mean, there is a pattern, isn't there? It may not be in the core of UKIP, but you do seem to attract these people.
Well, can I just, I knew this question was coming up, and it's quite right that it does. I want to make this clear. We are the only party in British politics who actually forbid former members of the BNP or other extremist organisations from even joining our party as members, and I've got that written into the constitution of the party. All right? The Labour Party have former BNP councillors who've defected to them, who now sit as Labour councillors in places like Stoke and other parts of the north of England. You know, you can comfortably leave the BNP tomorrow and join the Conservative Party or the Lib Dems and become an officer at local level. So we have done more than any other party in British politics to make sure there are no extremists in our ranks. Have we been caused embarrassment by some people? Yes. I put out a big call at the end of last year for as many people as possible to stand for UKIP in the English County Council elections, because I wanted the electorate to have the opportunity to vote for us and what we believed in. And 1,740 people came through and answered that call. Of that number, 6 caused us embarrassment. 6. Having been through, I suspect, the heaviest scrutiny any party's local election candidate list has ever been through. You know, Peter Mandelson and others who've got some very serious funding, for I'm not sure where, and I better not say what I think, otherwise I'll be sued, went right through every candidate of ours and found out if some of them had nutty or dangerous or unpleasant views. I promise you, if we'd done it to the Tory list, or the Labour list, or the Lib Dem list, we'd have found the same, or perhaps even worse. And in every case, Stephen, in every case, anybody, any of those half a dozen, who have brought the party into disrepute by breaking our constitution and our basic charter, have been got rid of. It is just as simple as that. And I know that our opponents will do all they can to throw the racism and extremism and the homophobic card and whatever else they can. But all I would say to you is, go and look, at any UKIP meeting of UKIP members. There are one or two in the front row here that I know, and you will find an absolutely huge cross-section of people from right across this country. We are not about racism. We are not about extremism. What we are about is making the word patriotism respectable again and ownership by us and not by the
Okay, let's move on to an association of that. I mean, one of your big campaigns, you mentioned it tonight, is immigration. Most of the Jewish community are in some way descendants of immigrants, not even necessarily refugees, immigrants.
Yeah.
There is a feeling, I mean, everybody has their own different views on different matters, but I'm interested in what appeal you think your anti-immigration campaign is, the specific appeal to a community that is descended from immigrants. How you think that would appeal?
My appeal to the Jewish community on this point would be that, like you, I'm a refugee. All right, they were going to burn us at the stake, and so we came to England seeking safe haven. So I think there is some degree of commonality there. On the basic question of immigration, you know, I think in some ways, the UKIP values will chime with large parts of the Jewish community, who believe in self-reliance, who want their kids to be educated well and have good schools to go to. And if the UKIP policy of bringing back the grammar schools in our cities succeeds, there'll be far better opportunities for Jewish children and children of all backgrounds. I think the fact we're pro-free market, we believe in business, and I've worked in business myself for 20 years, again would chime with many parts of the Jewish community. But I want to repeat this simple point, that immigration, including refugee status, from 1950 until Tony Blair got in, ran at 30 to 50,000 people a year, and that it's now been running for the last 10 years at 500,000 people a year. I think, as a French Huguenot descendant, that that's too much, and I would wager that many in the Jewish community would think that is too much. I mean, let me ask you, how many people here think that immigration into Britain, running at 500,000 a year, is sustainable and a good thing for this country? Hands up. And how many think it's not sustainable, we must cut the numbers down? Well, thank you very much for your questions answered.
Let's talk about schools. You talked about the policy of the grammar school.
Yes.
What's your position on, there's some controversy, a number of Muslim faith schools that are perceived as teaching as hotbeds of radicalism, as it were, of inculcating radical ideas into young children. What is your position on this?
We have to apply equal standards. The law is the law. Whatever your religion, whatever your background, the law of the land in this country absolutely simply must apply. And there is no way that a Church of England school would get away with preaching anti-Catholic hate. You know, the inspectors would be in there, you know, before you say Jack Robinson, wouldn't they? Close the place down. And by the same token, if through parental choice we're going to have some Muslim schools in this country, albeit with the 15% from other religions that the legislation would demand, if we're going to have Muslim schools in this country, the same laws must apply, and they must not be able to spout anti-Jewish hate without the same fear of being closed down. We must apply the law of the land equally. I'm a Christian, I'm a somewhat lapsed, but I'm still a member of the Church of England, and I can't tell you how absolutely shameful I thought it was that the last Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, actually said that we should tolerate and allow Sharia law in British cities.
I want to get you on to the question of faith schools and where you draw the line, because I want to ask you about some Jewish faith schools. An issue that's provoked some controversy in the last month or so has been the demand that evolution is taught as part of the national curriculum. And in some Jewish faith schools, there is some opposition from some of the more religious side of things. I was wondering what your position is on that.
I have to say, I mean, I strongly believe in free choice. I strongly believe in you got bored. I strongly believe in parental choice. Although, you know, I spent the earlier part of this week in Belfast, you know, where I saw very divided communities, and it sometimes when I see someone like Belfast, it does make me think twice about these things. I think, to be honest with you, in terms of the Jewish schools and the national curriculum and the teaching of evolution, I think it is actually important that all the kids in this country, regardless whether they're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Hindu or whatever they are, I think it's actually rather important that all of the kids are given the same basic exposure to ideas. Whether they agree with those ideas or not, they must be exposed to those ideas.
You actually mentioned in your remarks Shakita and circumcision and the pressures at the European level on those issues. One of the things that you may not be aware of, the JC conducted a poll in March of this year about attitudes just generally across the country to those two issues, and one of the statistics leapt out at us, which is that 71% of UKIP supporters are opposed to religious slaughter and to circumcision. And it's quite it was by far the strongest correlation of any political party to being either pro or anti. And it's quite a striking disconnect between...
Depends a bit how you ask the question, doesn't it? You know, it really depends, you know, do you think this is a good thing? Do you approve of this? Do you wish to do this yourself? Or do you wish to ban this? And they're very, very different things, aren't they? So, you know, even if that poll is correct, and even if 71% of UKIP supporters are not comfortable with religious slaughter because they come from a different culture and a different background, and it's not their way, that is not the same thing as saying to your community, you should not be allowed to do it. And I think one of the things that is clear and consistent in UKIP is whatever our views, whatever our disputes, whatever our dislikes, we are fundamentally a strong libertarian party that says you may pursue what you wish to pursue, providing it doesn't hurt or affect me. So I think that poll, and there are lots of polls like this, because they want to paint UKIP out to be, you know, completely turn the clock back to the 1950s and everything else, and you can prove all sorts of legal questions. That particular piece of evidence doesn't convince me of anything.
So you're unambiguous in your support for freedom for religious slaughter?
Well, why would Paul Nuttall, my deputy, you know, have worked as hard with Shimon Cohen as he's done over many, many months when there is a serious threat to your customs and way of life? And why would Stuart Agnew, you know, I mean, I've even got the report here. I mean, have it, please.
No, I'm sorry. I'm only asking the questions.
You know, why would Stuart Agnew have actually taken the trouble to go and visit the Jewish slaughterhouse, to look at it, and to conclude, I repeat, that compared with the mass killing factories that have become the general abattoirs in this country, he thought the standards were incredibly high. So, you know, I'm saying that because it's genuine, and it's true. And do you know what, Stephen? If it wasn't true, I wouldn't say it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm here to elicit information. Well, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience in a second, but I just wanted to ask you a few broader questions on Israel and the Middle East and those kinds of issues. What Middle East countries have you visited?
I've done business in Egypt. I did business in Lebanon. In fact, I went to Lebanon many, many times. Dubai, similarly. I've only ever been to the Middle East on business. I've never been on holiday. I did do business in Tel Aviv.
So you've been to Israel?
I've been to Tel Aviv once, but that was back in the 80s, and to be honest, I think I was there for 8 hours. Flew in, had a meeting, and left again. So I can't say to you that I'm a first-hand expert on the Middle East.
Because I'm interested in, I mean, let's take you as you would like to be taken, as a serious political force that one day would hope even to form the government. And let's say Nigel Farage is in charge, and let's say Israel bombs Iran, which has all kinds of consequences. I mean, I'm using that as an example because I want to draw you out on this. What's your reaction?
One of horror. If anybody bombs anybody, it's one of horror. I said earlier that I'm very sympathetic for Israel. I'm sympathetic because they're surrounded by states, many of whom actually want to obliterate them from the face of the earth. You know, and we in this country, ever since the Balfour Declaration in 17, have basically been clear and consistent that the Jewish people deserve and need a homeland. But can I actually answer this the other way around, if I may? And this is not being like Cameron or Clegg or Miliband, but I just wonder about our whole strategy with regards Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and now Syria. You know, we've been told through Blair, through Brown, and now through Cameron, that by intervening in all these wars, we're actually going to make the world a better, safer place. And actually, I think what we've done is to make the world an even more unstable place, where certainly life for Christians is now becoming intolerable in Libya and in Egypt. And I suspect that our intervention in all these areas, in some cases, has added to the rhetoric and the thought that America and Britain are on the side of Israel, and that actually Israel is being hated even more as a result of what we in America have done in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I, to get back to your original question, it's an almost impossible question to answer, because you can't answer it until you're there. I do not support acts of aggression, even from countries who feel their very existence is threatened. But frankly, when it comes to the Arab countries in the Middle East, I personally would pursue a policy of non-intervention. I don't believe our military action in those countries is making life better for anybody.
Because you see, we have a lot of, as a community, we're used to hearing politicians say how strongly they support Israel and how much they believe in its right to defence. And then as soon as Israel actually exercises that right to defence, suddenly it's disproportionate. Suddenly it needs to rein back. Suddenly that right for Israel to defend itself is very heavily qualified. And I'm interested in finding out where you qualify.
Well, hang on. Your question.
Yes. This is another question.
No, I mean, your question, and where this conversation is a difficult topic, I know, but your question actually began not with Israel defending itself, but with Israel launching an outright strike.
But that may be a defensive action, you see.
Well,
that's the issue.
Well, different question, then, isn't it?
Okay. Well, answer that different question. Answer that different question.
Well, I mean, clearly, if Israel is nakedly and outright, attacked, not just by suicide bombers, but actually genuinely attacked by another state, then clearly they're going to want to retaliate, as we would, for goodness sake. So I understand that.
But it's not always as simple as that. No. I mean, when Israel bombed Iraq in 1981, it wasn't attacked by Iraq, but had it left the nuclear reactor there to develop, then it might well have been. And it's a similar problem with Iran. Well, I'm just interested in where you stand on the difference.
I have to say, I personally think that the West has got Iran wrong. Mm-hmm. I think this is pertinent to us and even more pertinent to Israel. I think that the approach we've adopted to Iran, basically the sanctions approach, the cordon sanitaire approach, has been a mistake. Been a mistake because the French always, I shouldn't say this, should I, but it's true. The French always break the sanctions anyway. I mean, people always break the sanctions anyway. It's a fact. Whether it's Mark Rich or the French or whatever it is, people always break the sanctions. But actually, I think by putting sanctions on Iran, we've actually helped to foster the view, certainly Ahmadinejad before wished to believe that the West is all against them. Israel's mates in the West are all against them, and they're being forced into poverty because of the sanctions. And I think actually a more intelligent approach to Iran would have been we should have love-bombed Iran and given everybody free access to the internet and tried to make them as Western in their outlook and their approach as possible. And then they would have seen that actually living under Ahmadinejad and 16-year-olds being hung to death from cranes in full public view of 10 or 20,000 people actually wasn't the right approach. I think we can be cleverer in how we deal with states like Iran. I think we've handled it pretty badly.
Okay. I'm going to open it up. So we have two microphones, one for that side and one for that side. Please wait until I've pointed to you, and please wait until the microphone comes to you. Don't make a speech, ask a question, and try to keep it brief because you'd like to get as many as possible. Right at the back, sir, with your hand up. If you stand up, it'll be easier for the lady with the mic. Yeah, and can we have your name as well? Just there with the green shirt. No, I'm sorry, no, sorry, I'm pointing. You sir, that's it. And if you could say, I will come to you, but just not. If you could say your name as well, please.
My name is Keith Fraser, and I'm a member of UKIP. And you can don't back me. I think the one problem that UKIP has, I've got two questions by the way, we're going to come on to Israel.
Well, you're only going to ask one now.
Alright, well, the first problem that UKIP has is that when I tell people I'm thinking of running for UKIP, they say, oh, racist. And we know that it's not racist, we know that it's not against immigration, but what we need to tell people, okay, is it controlled immigration, therefore, not immigration within it. Now, I think UKIP has a bit of a PR problem. It needs to get over here if it's going to get into the mainstream. That's my first point. My second point, which was more relevant to the Israel topic, is that during the Gaza war, Mr. Farage on the question time said about Israel, if they respond to whatever provocation they get by effectively assassinating a leading figure on the other side, they can't be surprised if rockets appear on their territory. Well, as we all know, they attacked members of the other side by targeted killings to prevent rockets on their territory, as a warning to say, stop sending rockets over. That's number one.
Can we add a question?
But to that end, the United States assassinated bin Laden. Are we, on that note, entitled to expect it to be correct that the USA should get rockets over from Afghanistan?
Okay, thanks. We've got it just right.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, this whole retaliatory game that war becomes is horrible on both sides. And look, I just repeat, I've just come back from Belfast, all right, where they've been through 30 years of ghastly civil war, of atrocity on atrocity being committed by one side against the other. And even though it's not perfect, thank God I could walk through the streets of Belfast on Monday afternoon and it felt like any normal other British city. So there are sometimes solutions that can be found, and let's hope the day that comes to the Middle East will be a better day for the whole of the rest of the world. On the racist slur, look, you know, there is no truth in it. The BBC would love you to believe it. As a state broadcaster, David Cameron attempted to slag us off with using it, but actually, out there on Main Street, nobody sensible believes that UKIP is a racist party. They understand we talk good, plain, common sense, and immigration needs to be taken into serious control. That's it.
There's a chap there with blue t-shirt, glasses and a beard. No, sorry, not you, sorry. You qualify, so you speak as
I'm a Mark, and you make it sound very audible and very clear. The only thing is there must be some sort of cost. It's going to cost this country untold millions to actually withdraw and to come out and do what you want. And that's the one thing I find difficult to understand.
Well, sir, I would argue that it costs us untold millions to be in the blooming thing. A membership fee to the club of £55 million a day, and whilst we do get some of that back, we only get it back to be spent in ways that they can determine, not us. We have a massive cost to our industries of the Working Time Directive, which the National Health Service now say has cost them a complete fortune, the Agency Workers Directive, which is making Britain's labour market far less flexible than it used to be, and environmental legislation, which is putting 12% on your electricity bill and everyone in this room. But the opportunity cost of us being banned from making our own trade deals with the rest of the world. And that's called opportunity cost in economics. And I would argue, free from the European Union, we will go on buying Mercedes, I'll go on buying my Rioja, they'll buy some of our widgets and our insurance services, and trade will continue unaffected. Governments don't create business. It's consumers. By choosing to buy a product they trust at the right price. That's how business takes place, and not being in the European Union will not affect European business at all. It won't cost us a penny. It'll give us a massive opportunity to deregulate Britain and an opportunity for us to open up to the rest of the world. And I've got an idea. There are 54 countries out there that speak English, that have common law, that actually like us and stand by us when we're in trouble. And the sooner we extend Britain's free trade ideal, not just to Europe, but to the Commonwealth of English-speaking peoples around the world, the better off the British economy is.
Sir, yes, you stood up at the beginning. Wait a minute, wait for the mic, please, and then just give us the mic.
Yes, you go.
No, you do need it, please. Can we have the mic, please?
Mr. Farage and Mr. Chairman, with my Scottish accent, I am a Jewish refugee from Vienna. That's a few points. I am a genuine Scot on paper. Not only am I Scottish, I am British. Last but not least is what Mr. Farage says about grammar schools. Thank you, they set me up for life.
Yeah, there we are. Well, thank you, sir. And I must say thank you for those words. And you were very much politer to me than some of the people in Edinburgh were the other week when I was there.
Fluorescent arm, as it were.
Thank you, Nigel, for an entertaining talk. Many of us in here will have children who will emigrate to Israel. John Abrams. And so what that means is that we will have had free NHS, free primary school education, free secondary school education, we'll have had tax credits, but we wouldn't have contributed anything back. In effect, we're scroungers going over to Israel. Do you think we should then have to pay towards all the free benefits we've had, and then when we go and live in Israel? Secondly, it also creates dual loyalties. So, for example, you often heard in the election, a lot of people in the Jewish community voted on what's good for Jews in Israel. So I'm just also curious what you think about that in the London mayor election.
Well, I mean, you know, the overall percentage of the Jewish vote in London in a mayoral election is actually very small now compared to what the Muslim vote will be in a London mayoral election. And let's be honest about this. I mean, you know, there are now probably 1 million Muslims now living in London, so I don't think the Jewish vote is going to affect, particularly whether it's Boris or Ken or maybe even George Galloway next time round. Well, you know, I'm raising it because George Galloway, I think, is thinking of standing Mayor of London next time round on the basis that there are 1 million Muslim voters. I mean, it's, I'm not going to spoil your evening, but it is a fact. On the Israel point, look, I would say this to you, sir. If people have grown up here and benefited here and then moved to Israel, there's one big favour they can do us, and that's to make sure that Israel and Britain have much better terms of trade with each other than we've currently got, and will only be allowed to do that when we're outside the European Union, because the European Union is not pro-Israel, it's actually far more pro the other Arabs.
So, Madam with the blue dress on. Yes.
Assuming that UKIP does well in the next MEP elections, firstly, how would you expect your elected members not to jump on the gravy train like all the other members have done? Secondly, without any representation in Westminster, how would you expect to effect any change?
Well, the first point is that, you know, we will do our best to vet and to make sure that we get good people, but in the end our members will vote for who our MEPs are. And I hope we do get good, honest, true, decent citizens, but I'm sure, like any other political party, they won't all be perfect, all right? And one of the problems with Brussels is there are so many temptations over there. You know, and I spent 20 years in the city before going to Brussels, and I've been there during some of the fairly heady days of the 80s. And the first night I was elected, the first ever TV interview live I did was with Meridian, the ITV South region, and there I was, 1:30 in the morning, to a parliament I despised, under an electoral system I condemned, saying how pleased I was to have been elected to the European Parliament. But the chap did say, he said, "Congratulations, Nigel, you've done it," which of course showed you it wasn't the BBC, because they'd never say that, even now. You know, if we won the general election, they say, well, that was a bit of a freak result, wasn't it? This guy said, he said, well, Nigel, you're off to Brussels, well done, you said you'd do it. And when you get to Brussels, you'll find on your desk a never-ending round of invitations to lunches, dinners, champagne receptions. Do you think you'll become corrupted by the lifestyle? And I replied, live on air, in my first ever TV interview, no, I've always lived like that. We will do our absolute best to give you a list of good, honest, true men and women. But I can't give you a guarantee everyone will be perfect, because we're dealing with human beings. And Westminster, if I may, Steve, Westminster is really interesting. I would say this to you. What UKIP has done to the national debate on a whole range of issues over the course of the last year is the most incredible thing in British politics for a party as yet unrepresented in the Westminster Parliament. It is a truly astonishing and remarkable result. And when I hear people telling me, well, you know, unless you vote Tory, there won't be a referendum, because Ed's not going to promise one. I'll tell you what, Ed is going to promise one. Oh yes, they all promise one. At every election, they never deliver. If you really want a referendum on Europe, the way to make sure it happens is to make sure that in 2015 there is a significant body of UKIP MPs in Westminster holding the balance of power, and then there will be a referendum.
Hi, my name is Jen Isaacson. I'm a student at LSE. I'm involved in the LGBT society there. I want to ask if UKIP were to win the next general election, would you reverse gay marriage? What would you actually do about that?
Well, I think the problem with gay marriage is this. The real problem with gay marriage is this. I think the move 10 or 12 years ago towards civil partnerships has been a huge success. I think it's worked really well. I think nobody in the gay community has felt since that moment in time that they were discriminated against. All right? And it's worked. Fascinating. There was no demand for gay marriage. It was in no manifesto. Even Stonewall, the gay charity, was not campaigning for gay marriage. And yet the coalition have come up with this as being the big bright idea, and Labour, of course, won't oppose it. I'm opposed to it for this reason. If we allow the word marriage to be used in a registry office, but not to be used, as the legislation is currently framed, in one of our established churches, and by that I'm talking Church of England, but ultimately it could apply to other religions too, then there will be a case taken to the European Court of Human Rights on the grounds that the British state is discriminating. As we've seen overnight, the ECHR intends to intervene in every single aspect of British judicial law, and we face the risk that the word marriage will be enforced upon our churches, and that will be against the interests of hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of Christians. And I believe this. I believe tolerance and mutual respect need to be a two-way street, and we should not promote one set of group rights if it starts to impinge and hurt another set of group rights. And I think Christians and the faith communities have had a very rough deal over the course of the last few years, and it's about time we stood up for their rights too.
Thank you. If indeed the European Union is, so to speak, the root of all evil...
I didn't say that, but you did.
Well, it's a paraphrase.
But if you enjoy that, that's lovely.
Why,
I said nothing of the kind tonight, but do carry on.
Well, what is the reason, do you think, that the whole establishment of Oxford PPists has bought into this group thing? What are they in on that the rest of us are not?
The European Union is the best job creation scheme for career politicians the world has yet invented. If you lose your job as an MP, you're told, don't worry, old son, you'd always become an MEP. And if you lose your job as a cabinet minister, and I can think back to Leon Britton, to Chris Patton, to Neil Kinnock, come on, get some booing. You know, or Peter Mandelson, more booing. You know, and they all become European commissioners. I mean, you are literally, if you support the European project, you are absolutely guaranteed a job and a great pension for the rest of your lives. So is it any wonder that even when the Swiss, in their third referendum on the subject, by 78% said no, we don't want to join, not just the European Union, but even the European Economic Area, that despite that, the next day, a majority in the Swiss Parliament thought they should continue with negotiations. And it's the same right across Europe. And the real battle at the heart of this European project, it's career politics, not just in Britain, but right across the whole of Europe, against the views of ordinary people. And my job is to try and be a champion for ordinary people in Britain and right across Europe, and I'm proud of having that role, and I tell you what, we are going to win.
Lady in the greenish dress there. I'm going to take some, just so you know I'm not ignoring everyone, I'm going to take some more questions in front, then I'm going to go to the back, and then I'm going to come back to the front again.
Yes, I'd actually like to know how UKIP are going to roll back the politically correct damage done in the NHS, which is on the point of falling apart, as well as the armed forces and the police. Law and order is not law and order anymore, it's very politically correct.
I'm sure anybody in this room who's currently working in the police force would, affirm that they're more worried about gender awareness than they are catching criminals. And there is some truth in that stuff. Not everything Richard Littlejohn writes is true, but he does capture the essence of some of this. Look, I can't, that is a massive question, and it's a question about a complete change of culture in British government, but more particularly, a complete change of culture in our civil service. And maybe reforming our civil service might be an even bigger challenge than reforming Westminster and the government. I can't answer that because it's going to take a long time. All I can say to you, madam, is this. I am not pretending that EU membership is the root of all evil, and nor am I pretending, well, I did enjoy it, and nor am I pretending that leaving the EU solves our problems. It doesn't. But what it does do, it empowers us, the people, through democratic elections to solve our problems, and we must at least take the first step. Going on to civil service reform and everything else will take longer, but if I had anything to do with it, I'd give it a go. All right?
Right, I'm going to take one more from the front for a moment. The chap with the glasses, the white shirt, yes, you. But I'll come back to the front later, so don't worry.
So the whole of the UKIP policy about leaving the European Union is that after we leave, we'll have a free trade agreement with the European Union. But how is this sustainable and how is this workable when many leaders of European countries and leaders of the European Union have said that they don't want to have this free trade agreement with Britain if they were to leave the EU?
When Giscard d'Estaing drafted the European Constitution, and I was there in the room at the press conference on the day, a German journalist said, but Giscard, the British people will never accept a full political state. They'll never accept a European foreign policy. They'll never accept a European army. And Giscard replied by saying, if the British people do not want to be part of our European dream, they will be relegated to the status of a country like Switzerland. I thought, well, I can live with that. And repeatedly, EU commissioners have said, if you want to leave our club and just have a free trade deal, that's fine by us. And remember the point, sir, I made in my speech earlier. We are now trading a surplus with the rest of the world, but an eye-watering £45 billion a year deficit with Europe. If Angela Merkel said to Mercedes and the other companies, we're launching a trade war on Britain, she'd be removed as Chancellor within a fortnight. Now, the economic forces are stronger actually on their side to have a deal than they are on our side to have a deal. And last point, if I may, nowhere else in the world do you need to be in a political union to do business with each other. And it gets to the heart of this fundamental misunderstanding. Governments don't create business. Governments generally actually damage business. Business is done by consumers, buying products. That's how the world works. It's not right at the back, raising a programming thing. Rising very back, yes. Sir.
Hi, Nigel. Thanks for coming down tonight. My name is Azim Khan. What's your opinion on Islam? Not Muslim states or Muslims as individuals, but Islam as an ideology.
Well, I mean, look, you know, what's my view of Islam? It's a massive question. I want to say this to you. You know, however people in this room feel on this subject, we better face up to a basic, brutal, fundamental fact. There are basically 2 million Muslim people now living in Britain. It's a fact. Well, maybe 2.5, I don't know.
4 is the official.
Well, who knows? Who knows how many there are? But I mean, you know, and I get people at meetings like this saying to me, oh, well, we should be really tough on Islam. No, we shouldn't. We should be tough on the Islamists. Because there are actually lots and lots of vast majority of Islamic people who want to integrate, who want their kids to play football with their next door neighbours, who want to succeed and get on. You will not get from me a blanket condemnation of Islam or all the people that follow and advocate that religion, but we have got a very careful path to chart, and where we're going to need, sir, some real courage is not from people like me. Where we're going to need some real courage is from Islamic British people, who are going to need to stand up and start saying more loudly and more clearly to their extremist bedfellows, if you don't like it here, you best go somewhere else, because we don't want you.
With a blue t-shirt and 85 on it.
He's not 85, is he?
Hi, my name is Neil Sint. Just a couple of picking up on something you said before. Do you have a foreign minister that actually has any understanding of the Middle East? One of my concerns about something you said was that British armed forces going into Afghanistan, Iraq, and things causing problems. That's not the case. Sunni and Shia Muslims are killing one another, always have been, will continue to be for the moment. There's a real misunderstanding in the political forces. America in particular, they have no understanding of what's truly happening in these areas. The British Foreign Office has no understanding. All they're interested in is oil. And I think somebody really, really needs to understand what is going on there and make clear statements to solve issues.
Well, I would agree with that. And of course, you know, remember that the map of Iraq was drawn in the Foreign Office by Sir Mark Sykes on a map of North Africa with a pencil and a ruler, and the reason the top northeast corner of Iraq juts out and comes back again is because there was a fold on the paper. So, you know, we've been intervening in Middle Eastern affairs and not always getting it right for a very long time. I did it very interesting, actually, that the Shia-Sunni conflict actually is becoming a new feature, I think, in many ways, of what's happening in Syria and elsewhere, and an escalating feature. But I wouldn't for a moment challenge your assertion that the Foreign Office and successive British ministers don't seem to really understand the issues they're dealing with, which strengthens my view. Unless you know what you're doing, and it's in your national interest, and you genuinely believe and understand that you can make the world better, do not intervene militarily. And that is my view, very strongly indeed.
And chap right next to you.
My name is Mark Levine. Picture your mind forward to 2015. We faced another coalition government, potentially David Cameron leading it. Would you do business with him?
Well, it's jolly difficult to think about doing business with a chap who's consistently snooty and rude and abusive about who we are and what we stand for. It's difficult to think about doing business with a bloke who believes that EU membership is vital to our future, that wind turbines are a salvation, that gay marriage is an absolute priority in British society. Oh, well, at the same time as we're sending 5,000 of our soldiers their P45s by email, we're making sure we're paying the highest amount of foreign aid in the Western world. Very difficult to see me doing this with him.
Yes, you. Yes.
Hello.
Hold on the microphone. Give you 2 seconds.
Hi, my name's Anne Bazine. I wanted to ask you a question. When you are
Prime Minister. Could you tell me what the capital of Israel will be?
I'm not thinking that far ahead. That's not too good on both counts. And I wouldn't take the question, whatever the question was, on that basic premise. It would be arrogant and ridiculous to say so. We haven't even yet got a seat in Westminster. But what we are doing, despite that, is we're changing the future of British politics, and we'll go on doing so. Now, Chairman, I've had a long day. I have a feeling these questions could go on for hours. I'll take 3 more, all at once, and that'll be my lot. I'm sorry, but there's 3 people. There is a limit to what I can do.
There's 3 people I've already nodded to. Fine. Chap with the red tie at the front. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Farage. Thank you very much for raising the immigration debate. This country should be very proud. How would you stop migrant workers who are able to undercut the common folk of this country? They're taking half the minimum wage and they don't pay any tax. How are we to put an end to it?
Okay,
thank you.
Next microphone over here, please.
Thank you. My name is David Conway. Mr. Farage, there are some people who think that the European Union is not the root of all evil, but it is evil, but that is part of a grander scheme of things, which is seeking world government through the creation of trading blocs, and the name of Bilderberg has come up in that connection, among other organisations. I'd like to know what your view is as to whether or not, is it that just swivel-eyed lunacy, or is there any element of truth in any of that, and if so, how exercised should we be about it?
And then finally, the chap I wanted, yes, you.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. I'm a big fan of yours.
Sorry, not you.
Well, thank you, Ollie. I'm also a fan of yours, Mr. Farage. If we do eventually get an in-out referendum and the country has the sense to vote out, what is the future of UKIP?
Right, migrant workers being undercut. What we should not have into this country is the unrestricted flow of unskilled labour, which is allowed to be abused by unscrupulous employers. You know, the death of the 21 Chinese people in Morecambe Bay shows you some of the terrible things that are going on in this country, and that's what happens when you have lax border controls. I am not against, of course I'm not against foreign people working in Britain, but they should do so on regulated work permits. Their numbers should be controlled. They should prove they have an address to come to, and if we did that, we give British workers a far better chance in life. David asked about, you know, the EU and actually bigger games that are going on. Well, Obama, of course, is very much part of those bigger games. I've been fighting like crazy for 20 years to try not to believe that there was some bigger global game afoot. I have to say my resistance is now weakening considerably to this. And yes, there are people who want, you know, for there to be a global government on a very big scale. And top of the list is one of my least favourite politicians in the world. Unelected, scruffy, with the charisma of a damp rag. And Herman Van Rompuy talks regularly about the need for global governance and how the EU must be a promoter of it. It's even more worrying and even more detached than the European Union, and it's certainly not swivel-eyed to say so, though isn't it funny, swivel-eyed become quite trendy these days. And the last question, what happens if we have an in-out referendum? And the British people vote to get back our independence, self-respect, pride and sovereignty. Well, the first thing that happens is we have the biggest party in Trafalgar Square and all the way down the Mall that we've had since VE Day. All right, that's the first thing we do. And the second thing we do is we wake up the next day realising that after nearly 40 years have not been responsible for running British agriculture and British fishing and British business and British trade policy, that suddenly we're in control. And I tell you something, it's going to be a very sobering thought. Because a lot of those skills actually have been lost or put into abeyance. So we're going to need a British government with vision, with vigour, and one that's going to have to work a downside harder than any British government has worked, actually since World War II, to help us get rid of the excessive, costly, ludicrous, ridiculous stuff and to turn us into a modern, global economy. Whether it's UKIP that takes on that mantle of changing Britain, or whether it's somebody else, actually, sir, isn't the point. Glorification of political parties leads to disaster. It is not the party that matters, it's the country that matters. And what matters to me is the memory of those that went before us to defend freedom and liberty in this country, and my absolute determination to hand those freedoms on to my 4 children so they can grow up in a country they can call their own.
Just before we finish, I'd like to once again thank you all for coming. I mean, it's amazing. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks again to Hasmonean for hosting us. Nigel gets to make a load of converts. I get to make about 50 people who think I'm the devil because I didn't call them. I'm really sorry. It's not personal.
Well, can we just say, Stephen, I'm going to say on behalf of the audience here, mega thanks to the Jewish Chronicle, but and to you for doing it with such style and such brilliance. So thank you.
I would just like to say thank you so much to the staff at the JC, to Katie and Melody, everybody who's been helping. Really, you don't know what goes on behind the scenes, and thank you so much.
Can I make one request? One request. It's a slight commercial. If anybody wants to leave with a souvenir, I've got some genuine Belgian down rags.